climate change and groundwater. I am Doreen Nampofo. You can join the conversation on our social media platforms on Facebook at GBC Ghana, YouTube at the GBC Ghana, on Twitter at the GBC Ghana, and also on WhatsApp. I'll be announcing those numbers very soon. Now let's get into the studios. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we keep having hearing climate change, climate change, climate change. To the ordinary Ghanaian, what should that mean to that ordinary Ghanaian for them to easily grasp or appreciate the issue of climate change?
Thank you very much, Doreen. To put it in the ordinary way for the ordinary Ghanaian, climate change is simply the depletion of the ozone layer due to certain gases that we have produced as a result of man activities. And as a result of that, we have increase in temperature on the earth. And therefore, temperature is the energy that drives all the other weather parameters. And therefore, once there's increase in temperature, you have changes in the world. So simply put, it is more temperature due to the depletion of the ozone layer.
Yeah. And what are these emerging issues? Yes, we're saying that the earth is getting drier and drier, temperatures are rising, but really, what are these environmental issues that they bring, climate change brings?
Yes, before Oli comes in, the fundamental element that is affected by climate change and increase in temperature is definitely water resources. Increase in temperature affects rainfall. Rainfall is the inputs of water resources for every country globally. So if the temperature increases, the water resources situation will change. First of all, let me point out that there is a shift in Ghana, and I want to narrow it down to Ghana, in the rainfall season. Wherever you live, and if you are 40 years old or above, at least you will notice that is a dramatic shift from when we used to have the rainfall setting in and now when it sets in. And it's not just the shift that is the problem, it's also the unpredictability of it. If there is a pattern of shift, it is easier for us to adapt. But the shift has no pattern. There are times we have rainfall in different months, and then we have high rainfalls in different months. It makes it easy for planning purposes. And if you can't plan as a human being, you're already doomed to fail. And that is what climate change brings to us.
So I was just reading a piece by a researcher, and I don't know what to say, I'm confused or I'm intrigued by some of the findings the researcher puts out. And he says, we are talking about a shift in rainfall pattern. Some have also said that we get a decrease in rainfall, but here he says that due to climate change, an average rainfall will increase by 15 mm and 20 mm from the baseline period in 2050. I think that's from 2050 to 2070. Yeah. Do you have any idea, Ogad?
But as just has been said, I mean, the climate change creates changes of weather patterns. And that can mean in some areas there's an increase in rainfall, but in other areas actually a decrease in rainfall. Yeah. And we see that globally. There can be these changes create and goes very fast. These changes really is a challenge for many people. So that he might be right in the southern part of Ghana. I could imagine due to climate temperature rises, there'll be more humidity from the sea, and it will increase the rain over the southern part. But at the same time, we can have a reduction of rainfall, as we know we have in the northern part of Ghana and the whole Sahel region, for example. So these changes are going at a pace we haven't seen before. I think that's one of the dramatical issues of the climate change. But
I want to say that if rainfall, the amount of rainfall is increasing, then it means more water on the under the ground for us. Shouldn't we be happy?
Okay, yeah, that would have been the logical conclusion. Unfortunately, climate change brings about the intensity of the rainfall is very high. The duration is very short. So you have the same amount of rainfall within a shorter period of time. And that is why we are having the extreme impacts. You have a lot of flooding because you have too much rainfall with high intensities. There is no time for the rainfall to sink to the groundwater. And then it floods communities, cause a lot of distractions. So it is not necessarily more rainfall better for Ghana or for any country. It depends on how it is distributed. And climate change does not distribute rainfall in a way that human beings will want it. So we have too much flooding these days. If you recall, almost every year there is flooding somewhere in Ghana. The frequency of floods have increased. Honestly, from 2001 up to now, the disasters that we have faced in this country, 70% of them are attributed to climate change through weather, related disasters. So we have to face, investment in recovery, investment in resettlements, and then it takes time to recover from a disaster, and that is not good for a developing country like Ghana.
The drying up of these, we know that these aquifers in the rocks hold the water at the ground. Would we say that the impact of climate change, draining out the water from these aquifers, is it the biggest impact of climate change as of now?
In relation to the groundwater?
Yes, in relation to groundwater.
You can say the biggest, in some areas actually the groundwater will rise, the groundwater table will rise, and that can also create problems. Where in lowlands where we have houses and industries, if the groundwater is relatively shallow or close to the surface, if it rises just half a meter or 1 meter, they can start struggling with groundwater coming from below. And that can also be almost a flooding from below. Of course, if you have groundwater reduction, the lowering of the groundwater table, you might have wells that are drying out, you might have streams that are drying out, and that's for sure a problem as well. So again, both directions can be, the change makes the challenge for the people living where they're living. And you can see, good example, even in Germany last year we had a very severe flooding in the rivers, and that was causing a lot of damages. So it's not only a question of developing countries, it's the whole world that are hit.
Well, we know that it's not the issue of developing countries, but the truth is that we get to feel it more because we really do not have the resilient, we do not have resilient communities, and so we get to feel the impacts more. You
have a point there. But you can do a lot about with the planning of cities, proper planning. There's a lot of measures you can implement without additional costs, but all that is long-term, and you need to think it into how you develop your cities, also your agriculture, etc. That is required because we need to adapt to the changes. That's basically the whole trick. Our water supply system needs to adapt to how things are changing, so we don't face water stress or water crisis suddenly.
Before we get to what we need to do to be resilient to climate change, now, how does this issue of climate change, you have the Water Resources Commission, how is it influencing management of water resources in this country? In fact, is it influencing it at all?
Yeah, significantly, Doreen. To be honest with you, it's one of the major challenges we have. There are other challenges we can easily control within Ghana. In terms of pollution, if we have waste disposal systems, we can correct that in Ghana. We don't need external help. But when it comes to climate change, the problem is it's a global measure. Ghana can do as much as we want. If we are the only one acting, you cannot resolve the issues of climate change. So what we have done is to try, like Ole said, we have to adapt to be able to build our capacity to live with the impacts of climate change. The biggest in terms of water resources is flooding in Ghana and droughts. And that affects food security. And when food security is affected, then that also brings about importation. So the entire economy will be affected. So we have to find ways to be able to, build our resilience, especially for the communities and the urban poor. We need to build their resilience to be able to cope with climate change. Just as you said, the developing country is more impacted by climate change impacts than the developed countries. And it is not time to shift blames. Under the Paris Agreement, every country agreed to contribute towards solving the climate change problems. Ghana has its own contribution, which is a nationally determined contribution, which is a package of what Ghana is supposed to do to assist in the global context on how to minimize the impacts of climate change.
But as a commission itself, do you have any policies, any plans on how we can even harvest this water, I mean excess water in the environment? You talk about flooding and we see it every year, but this water we see go away just easily, wasting. We could actually harvest it for something more useful instead of allowing it to go waste, destroying property, killing people. How is the Water Resources Commission managing, or I mean putting in place policies to ensure that even if we experience flooding, this water is harvested for proper use?
Yeah, very brilliant idea, and that is what we have been working on. If you notice, we have come up with scientific models that we can predict flooding at least 5 days before it happens. All that is to build the capacity and reduce the impacts of the floods. As far as policy is concerned, if you recall or if you are aware, the national water policy is being revised, because the time we developed this policy in 2007, the issues of climate change were not that clearer in terms of the science of it. So what was put in there was more like a projection. Now we have the impacts with us now. So the idea is to revise the policy to give it that climate proof, directives, for all plans to comply. And sometimes it's not just the policy, Doreen, it's also with the implementation. The devil lies in the implementation. You can have a very nice policy. It requires investment. Oli will tell you more about that. And that is where we lack. For instance, one of the policy directives was to build the Palgu Dam. A lot of people do not even know what is the driver for the construction of the Palgu Dam. It is not hydropower. It is not irrigation. It was started by, flood control due to climate change and the intensity of the rainfalls. Yes, and then the operations of the Bagre Dam. Then we said, okay, we cannot just build a dam of $1 billion just for flood control. What can we do with it? Let's add irrigation component to it. That will bring the benefits. Let's add energy. But the driver, the engine of that concept was the flood control. The problem is the investment and not more of the policy.
I'm really fascinated about what you said, because I really didn't know we even had a water policy, usage policy. So I'm just curious. I mean, before the policy before, I mean, thinking of rehashing or revising the policy, what did it actually say?
Yeah, the policy was basically, making water available for all economic aspects, hydropower, energy, the environment, sustainability, and things like that. Little did we know that one of the biggest, drivers of the water resource was climate change. Because at the time there was climate change, but the science was not clear. Like you mentioned from this research, there are some research that said we're going to get more water, and others said we're going to get less water. You can't plan on both sides. So the idea was to manage in between. But now the picture is very clear. We know where Ghana is going as far as water resources is concerned. We know the impacts of climate change. So it is therefore necessary for us to revise the policy to reflect this, validated, knowledge, and that is why we are doing that. And the policy has actually captured most of these issues that you highlighted as part of the directives, for Ghana going forward in dealing with climate change.
So, Olga, if you were to be the one working on this policy, what would you have wished was included in it?
I mean, the integrated planning, I mean, the different stakeholders, as you said, in the different industries, mining, citizens of Ghana, they all want the same water. So we need to find a good way to share it and not to pollute it. These are the two, the quality and the volume of the water we need to protect. So that integrated planning, and all need to agree on that and find incentives to really confront these challenges. And that can be from household level. You can, as you said, infiltrate water that will recharge your groundwater. You can use it for gardening, etc. Industries can do everything, even without a policy. Everybody can do quite a lot. And just to make it very concrete, from my own country, we have multifunctional activities. A soccer field can be used for could you say, avoiding flooding in the city. It's used 360 days a year is for soccer, but 4 days a year it will capture the rain cloud bursts and store that to avoid it's running out into the streets and mixing up with wastewater. So it has different purposes, and there's a lot of these solutions you can implement in your cities and your communities that is really helping a lot and avoiding flooding in urban areas.
So that technology is really interesting, but the issue he talks about and really is investment.
Yes.
Are we going to be able to invest in such a technology?
Of course you need investments, and but I think it has to be embedded in all investments, the climate adaptation, energy, water. It has to be a part of the projects, not something add-on. Integrated is the key way forward. But it's required, because if you don't do that, your investments will not be protected. You can make some installations. If it's not properly adapted to the climate change you can foresee, you might lose it due to flooding or something else within 10-15 years. Now, of course, we need investments of improved water services in our cities and in communities, but that's not different from all times. We always need that kind of investments, but it just has to include the climate adaptation as well today. And there's a lot of green infrastructure. We should use our ecosystem more. There are green infrastructure that's not so could you say financial capex intensive. You don't need a lot of money, but you can do a lot with the possibilities you have in your nature. So the wetlands are ways forward to use them actively, the parks, etc. You can do quite a lot actually.
Dr. Alpha, are these plans that we have in the revised policy?
Yes, actually, because nature-based solutions are cheaper and sustainable. So we try to promote that as much as possible. The problem is that engineering solutions are quicker and then solve your problems faster. Natural-based solutions take time, but they are more sustainable. So what we do is try to combine, for instance, I think about towards the end of last year, we heard about the issues of the sea rise that was actually eroding in Keita and things like that. You cannot start with natural solutions. You will have to go in with the engineering methods. But for the long term, when you plan and you predict this situation for a long period of time, then you can introduce what Ole is talking about, which is the natural-based solutions. It's cheaper, it's more sustainable, and it's effective. But when the problem confronts you, then you have to go in with the quick measures, which is to build engineering solutions, the grounds, to protect the villages. So we are trying to look at how we can combine those two, methods effectively, to protect people against the impacts of climate change. Okay.
Yeah. So before we continue, let me alert our viewers that we are going to have a conversation with the Ghana Watch Journalist Network, GWGN. Because they recently went around some communities, and today they are launching their reports on what they found out in those communities about how groundwater resources are being used, and they also looked at how climate change and pollution is affecting these groundwater resources. So we have one of them on the line, Justice Lee Adoboy, and he'll be telling us more about that report. Good afternoon, Justice.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, Justice, grateful for your time. You are launching your report today. Tell us more about what you found out and what is contained in your report.
Okay. So in the video, what we launched today is our video documentary on the state of water bodies in Ghana. Yes, and we teamed it clean water bodies for sustainable water delivery. Now, the reason we did that is that when you look at the SDG Day 6, that is 1, 3, 5, Now, Target 1, we talked about access to water, and we talked about safe, accessible, and affordable water for all. But we realize that in those 3 and 5, it emphasizes the protection of water bodies from pollution and then integrated water resource management. And we realized that the framers of the SDG had in mind the fact that you cannot have sustainable water delivery if water bodies are not protected and are managed, in an integrated manner. And so this is the reason we went out to look at the state of water bodies across the country, because this is what we will be depending on into the future to be able to provide water, sustainably for everybody in Ghana. And you know that the goal has a target date of 2030. However, Ghana has had its own target date of 2025, where we said we will provide water universally for everybody. And so the state of our water bodies, are they such that we can achieve these goals? If we miss it in 2025, can we achieve them in 2030? This is the reason we went out to town to look at the state of our water bodies in the country. Now, what we found out is that water bodies are still under severe pollution. In the western region, we are talking about Anko Bra, which are still as murky as we saw them a few years ago before the Galamsey project started. When you come to Bensu, which is just close to us here in Accra, the color is green. The water in Bensu is very green, and it is due to agricultural activities, uncontrolled use of agrochemicals that slips into the water and then causing the nutrient levels in the water to rise. And this actually creates a huge problem for Ghana Water Company in treating water. But they need to spend a lot of resources to treat this kind of water for our consumption. There is a river around Obuasi called Oda. And it is so dirty that Ghana Water Company tells us they can only produce water at half capacity. And due to that, water rationing is what goes on around, their catchment area. And then we also, when you go to the Savannah region, the most prevalent situation you see there is also climate change related, because there are sources of water, most of which are dams, hand-dug wells, boreholes. They are beginning to dry up in the dry season. Boreholes that used to yield a lot in the past, these days dry up. Their production drastically reduced in the dry season because they cannot, continue. They cannot sustain. They cannot stand the dry season. And so, in all, what we are saying is that yes, the statistics points to a very positive figure that Ghana is on the course to achieve the SDGs by SDG targeted by 2030. However, that exists. There are places we still walk kilometers to be able to access water, and this water is also not one that you and I will be willing to drink or even bath or wash with. But for some communities, this is the only semblance of water they can have. You see, and some of these communities live close to major rivers where the intake is to treat water for, urban communities. But these people do not have water. They don't have, even distribution channels running through their community. And so they are forced to depend on water that they share with farmhouse animals like, cattle, and you can imagine the disease burden this creates for the country. And so although there is a semblance of Ghana moving towards achieving the SDG Goal 6, the gaps that exist, we cannot ignore them at this point. We need to carry everybody along to be able to achieve that, tagline that the UN uses, leaving nobody behind. But I think that now we are leaving many communities behind.
Now, Justice, what the sort of information you seem to be getting from official stakeholders is that there's really the issue of investment. Government has a lot of priority areas. You're not saying that water is not a priority, but if there are no investments, if there's no money, what else can government do? They can only provide for the areas that is easy to provide for.
This is one of the things we captured in the report, that you see, Ghana Water Company, for instance, the money they spend on chemicals alone could have been used for expansion, could have been used, to increase production, to reach the unreached areas. However, because we continue to pollute the water bodies, this money that could have been used to expand is now being channeled into drinking to serve the existing, people that they have been serving. So as water pollution goes on, government will continue pumping money into the sector, yet we will not be able to reach certain people because the challenges on the way that DWCL and TWSA need to deal with are enormous, and they are created by ourselves. It is self-inflicted.
Well, grateful for your time, Justice.
You're welcome.
That is Justice Lee Adoboy. He is with the Ghana Watch Journalist Network. And back to the studio, gentlemen, you've heard him. And one major issue he talks about is pollution. And pollution has set up some sort of relationship with climate change. How do we make sure that we try to, yes, we cannot do much about climate change as it is, and we just have to be resilient and deal with it as we go along. But pollution, what do we do?
I mean, we have a strong regulatory framework, but as you said before, it's not enough to have the rules. You also need to implement them. So every institution responsible for their part should really make an extra effort to make sure that the industry is not discharging what they shouldn't do, that the agricultural sector is not using too many pesticides, that galamsey is not going on. All these pollutants together is impacting negatively the water bodies, and that's what we just saw. The most vulnerable drinking from the streams, they are really affected directly with pollution. Again, it's how you make this change. It's a long process. I think they should see there's a law, they should comply, follow them, of course. But there's also should be some incentive for how to reduce the discharge of wastewater. So there's many ways forward on that, I think. But something has to be done, especially in the densely populated areas.
Dr. Alpha.
Yes, just to add to what we said, is enforcement is key. All his assessment, is it Lee? Justice, yes. His assessments is not far from what we know, that it exists on the ground. The issues we have to deal with is the natural issues, which is the climate change, and then the man-made ones. Pollution has always been a problem, a challenge. The Water Resources Commission has done quite a lot of work in terms of creating the awareness, especially for the formalized institutions, like the district assemblies that are in charge of waste. We've done quite a lot of work with them. But when it comes to the illegal, entities, the galamseys, I think they have contributed about 70% of the pollution of the water resources that is the challenge now. And that becomes a bigger problem than a single institution like the Water Resources Commission. And that is why normally it is referred to the national security, because it's a threat to national security. It's not just a threat to water resources. And we need to do more when it comes to the illegal mining. It is not an issue that should be played with. It can actually, cause serious consequences, not only for water, but for the entire economy. And that is what we preach.
Back to the main issue on climate change. We even heard Justice speak about the North and the fact that they seem to be severely impacted by the issue of climate change, streams and water bodies drying up. When it comes to water and climate change, the focus is always on the North. But even in the urban areas in the South, we seem to be having these challenges. We seem to be also be impacted by climate change. How does it become a problem for people in the urban areas, urban poor?
Okay, so first of all, it normally starts with a problem, maybe in the north or the rural areas, because they depend largely on the environment, the natural environment. People in the cities are not too much dependent on the natural environment for their livelihoods in terms of farming, the use of the forest, the use of other natural resources. So when that is depleted in the rural areas, what happens is that there's migration. People start moving towards the cities. And then when they come to the cities, they add up to already the existing challenges. So the problem becomes pronounced. And that is why normally you see urban poor, because there's quite a lot of migration. People cannot do rain-fed agriculture again because the rainfall is unpredictable. Harvests are bad. So when there is nothing to do and there is no food, there's no money, the next thing is to move. And that is why it triggers into our urban situations. Yeah. So it doesn't start from here. A problem can be triggered from somewhere, but the effect of it will be felt in the cities. And that is the main challenge.
So, Mr. Struttrup, you have been with the Netherlands Embassy, the consular, Danish Embassy, Water, City and Resilience Desk. Yes, I'm sure with this you've traveled across the country.
Yes.
What do you see on the ground in relation to water challenges, climate change, building resilience for these communities to be able to withstand the impact of climate change? Are we doing enough?
Yeah, of course, you can always do more, but I think it's very hard to really make, in some areas of the country, it's very hard to be fully climate resilient. It requires some additional work and investments. As you said, when the livelihood is getting too tough, it's too difficult to survive, people start walking, and often towards the big cities in the southern part, where we already have a stress on the water services. But somehow we need to accept this migration of people that's in all countries in the whole world, where the jobs are, the people go. So we need to upgrade, and that's what Groundwater is working hard on, upgrade the services in water services in the cities, also the whole wastewater management side. We need to, including the climate adaptation, we need to upgrade. And that's of course investments and long-term planning, coordination between the municipalities, and that's also why we are here as Denmark.
So let me announce to our viewers our lines for sending messages on WhatsApp. You can send the messages on 055 744 6429, 055 744 6429. On phone you can call on 0264 000 997. Now, we're speaking about the urban poor, but what of those in the slums? I mean, you talk about migration, which is an outcome of some of these climate change challenges in the northern part of the country, and the reason why people have to migrate. This is what actually leads to the creation of slums. But even there in the slums, their problems are compounded.
Yes, when it comes to climate change, there are some people who are more vulnerable than others, and the people who are in the informalized kind of structures. When floods come, maybe your house will be able to stand the impact of the floods, but these people migrate into the slums, and what they do are temporary structures, so they are not resistant enough to withstand the kind of disasters that are generated by climate change. So mostly, and of course, it is where they settle. Most often they settle where people do not want to. And those areas are already disaster-prone areas. All the good places are taken by the people who... So the slums are the most vulnerable when it comes to climate change.
So let's hold there. We have a caller. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Yes. Good afternoon. Welcome to Wash. Please go ahead with your point.
Thank you for having and good evening. Good afternoon to your listeners from your school. I want to ask one question. The borehole that we are doing, is it not going to affect the climate system? Is it not going to affect it? And two, right now the water we are getting now, it's not factor. It's very good. So what is the water company doing about it? Right now it's like even we are all not having adequate work. And what is government doing about it? Can we also do this to companies like foreign companies to maybe take over so that they can see that?
Well, caller, I don't know. We can't seem to be getting you clearly. So if you could say all that, repeat all that you said again, so that we can hear you clearly. Because for us in the studio, we can't get you clearly. We know you are talking about water and some boreholes, but we can't really get exactly what you're saying.
Okay, it's on speaker. So now let me put it this way.
Good.
You see, what I'm saying, right now we are having a lot of challenges with water system. People are digging boreholes. And the borehole, is it good for the country? Is it going to affect it in any way? Two, the problem we are having with the water we are having now is very dirty. Can government give it to another private company to maybe say, okay, handle water project and take your bill, run it, and maybe after some distance we take over. You see, so that if we can give it to private, at least district and region, everybody can get water, because it's different company, and everybody will see to it that I'll give adequate quality water to my people so that they can be able to pay. If you are giving good service, people are ready to pay. So it's about time government have to see to it that you don't have to do everything alone. If it's road, give it to contract. Some company, they do it, they put toll, they collect money. If it's water, give it to some company, district or region. Give it to them and let them do. Go have the contract with them. If they have to do it for 15 years, 20 years, then you know that after the 20 years, government take over.
Okay.
Because I think government is hustling too much about water, energy, and a lot of stuff.
Well,
you hear me? If you hospital, we can also do it. Give it to private companies. If you go, you pay. You hear me? So
yes.
after some time, then government will take over.
Thank you very much, caller.
Government to see to it that to involve partnership, other people, because government jobs are not moving well. They are not attractive. They are not performing. You see, so let competition come so that people will be okay with it, and let people, you know, because if you go to Europe, people build roads, they do a lot of things, and privately, and they get their money, they give what belongs to government.
Okay, your point is well made, caller. My gentleman in the studio try and then answer some of the issues that you've raised. First, Mr. Alpha, he's asking whether the indiscriminate construction of boreholes or digging of boreholes, is it going to have any impact, or is it going to contribute to this climate change issue we are talking about, and then in the long run impact access to water? Yeah,
for sure. I think that is one of the reasons why we talked about regulating the development of groundwater resources. If we don't regulate it, definitely it will have an impact. Coupled with the impact of climate change, that will even increase the effect in terms of the levels of groundwater. So we need to regulate how it is developed. We can't just allow anybody to develop it the way they want. We try to promote the use of groundwater, developed. On the issue of Groundwater company and government, there's already private partnership in terms of water supply, but of course Groundwater company is the biggest. A lot of people do not know that we have the community water and sanitation agency. That is also a bigger water service provider to the rural areas.
Okay.
So it's not just Groundwater.
So we have Edie from Tabora. Let's hear from Edie. Edie, Tabora. Edie, can you hear me? Hello, Edie.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Edie. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Let's say hi to you before. And at the same time, the caller who just left before me, I agree and support with all what he said, that we should privatize the water, the private company. Reason being, as he said, I heard the man at the studio saying that the part of the water is given to the private company, but we want fully given the private company. But the reason why being that the managers of the water, they are not managing it well. You can see a Ghana Water Company a personnel. It will come a single day and lay more than 100 coils. As I'm talking, 100 coils is taken from GBC, from when your studio is to the main road. Maybe say the Aquadia Road, only one person will lay that pipe. Within 2-3 days, the pipe will be all worn out. Then when we open the tap, the water is just running away, and they don't have staff who will go around and even make that maintenance. So if it is a practice and he knows that no, it's getting lost, he will find people even be that the same area where their lights are and repair those sites. So if they are giving to a private, I think we get that, because those working at the government, the majority of them, they are not doing well, and they are not doing what for the country. Not only the Ghana Water, all the government sectors, the most of them. As I'm talking to you, and in my area, they used to open the water, I think 2 or 3 days in the week. The water needs to come twice. It will get a time when they open the water, it's just the pipes are back and just water flowing away without any water staff who even think that, oh, let us go and even make this because of this. And when you make a complaint, they will even mind you. So better give it the private company. That's my own suggestion. Have a good evening.
Well, thank you very much, Edie, for your contribution. And it seems many people really do not have access to water in the urban areas like we thought. But let's stick to the topic you're discussing, that's the climate change aspect and how it's contributing to this lack of access to water in our communities. How do we build this resilience? Yes, we've spoken about it, but it seems that the problem is still there. How do we really make sure that, apart from these rural areas, whose problems are compounded in the urban areas, must we change something? Some have talked about privatizing these the Ghana Water Company to ensure that they can actually have access to water. Is that an option that you think that would solve these challenges?
Yeah, I think privatizing is not a quick fix. Of course, you should have a good, close collaboration with the private sector, because they also have a lot of knowledge and experience they can bring into the solution, into the equation. But I think to have a strong water is a strategic sector. So I think, in my opinion, it should be in the hands of the governments, because giving it over to private sector, you never really know how to. But that's a long discussion. But I think there's no doubt that the Ghana Water, they're doing a lot, and they're doing it well, I think. Of course, in the big cities like Greater Accra, you're lacking water. We know they're losing 30, 40, 50% in the water distribution system, and that's water that should actually reach the customers and not seeping out into the soil, into the ground. So there's a lot of technical issues, a lot of administration, but they are improving and they're working on that. They know it, so they actually have a clear strategy for reducing the non-revenue water. They are trying to expand the volume getting into the system, and there are big projects on that. So I think they're doing a lot, but as you said, the growth of Greater Accra is tremendous and has been for many years. So the service demand request is huge, and you're always lagging a little bit behind because the sprawl and the expanses of new communities. And
it's also, like you said, really because people are moving into the cities. I mean,
yes.
the north particularly, farming, which they used to do, is not really viable now because the rains are not really falling when they should fall. When they fall in huge quantities and destroy the foodstuff. So then they do not really have anything to do. They have to move down.
Yes, yeah.
And migration is a big factor in terms of it is difficult to plan for that level of migration. Sometimes you can look at the growth rate of Accra and then you say maybe it's 3% per annum. But when migration comes, it can be 10%. And then already the 3%, the investment requirement, you don't even get 100% of that. Then you have 10% migration. So this kind of challenges requires strategic investments to be able to address them. It is not the competence or the absence of it of Groundwater Company. It has to also do with the investment. One thing we have to remember is that...
Please hold for me. Let's pick Gordon from Medina. Gordon. Hello. Yes, Gordon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, madam.
Yes, Gordon, make your point.
What I feel,
hello, Gordon.
Yeah.
We can hardly. Okay, I think it's better.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
I said that I also want to read my question is that when I was around my business, I went to then come down and then come to our area. So the government can buy and then to Groundwater, if you submit contract to become something about it. You see, but then about 3 months now, there's no water. You see, some of the there's don't be. So I just saw that water company has made like people the water the line about 3 months now. You see, so people have a borehole that is sold to the market, and then they want to sold to allow. See, and water companies, they have their tankers that go to find water and then they will. You see, all it is water. And water is life. You see, so what it is water. So if Ghana can stand up, and then it will be very good. Water is life.
Hello, Gordon, can you lower your set? Gordon, can you lower your set?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Are you done? Oh, that was Gordon. But Ms. Alpha, you're talking about planning and the fact that we are really unable to plan because of the mass migrations. Is it? I mean, if we know that these are the numbers coming down, what is so difficult about planning? What is really so difficult? I mean, we understand that there's a challenge there. Climate change is really making the place extremely difficult to live in. Why don't we focus on making the place resilient? Why don't we focus on providing them with what they need so that they actually stay there and do not come down to compound the climate change situation you're already facing down south? Exactly.
And actually that is the focus of government policy. It's not to promote migration, even though we are not against migration. It's not something you promote. You want people to live comfortably within their areas where they have.
Before you continue that point, we have another caller, Isaac from Pokwase. Hello, Isaac. Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Isaac.
Yeah, please, I'm very concerned about the discussion we are having, please.
Isaac, please lower your set. Or you can put it off. We seem to having some feedback from your end.
Please, are you okay?
Yes, I think we should manage with this.
Yeah, I'm so concerned because I'm a surveyor. I travel a lot across the country.
And since it's a problem across the country that I've been seeing from other community areas and other regions. And me myself, within my area, we dig borehole for past 4 months and we were not able to use the water due to the land sector and everything. And I'm thinking, for what my other colleagues said, we should give the whole thing to private companies so they should manage, and government should have just by percentage, if really something that they can do to help the system. But if the government to control the Ghana Water Company issue, I don't think the country will have something better to serve the people in the nation. Because going to Sunyani, somewhere like Teshi and other places like Udima across the country, I travel places a lot, and I say, what a problem everywhere. So I'm begging you, please do something better. And maybe the government should take itself out of the issue, the whole thing, and they should give it to the private company. Because when you go to Boga, in fact, it's a very terrible. This Balugo Dam project, you are the one who did it. We went there and it's like, it's okay. So please, I'm only begging you just to do something better. And the government should just give a small percentage. And if something better could be done to serve the I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Isaac. And we seem to be still having that the issue about privatizing Ghana Water Company.
Doreen, there is one aspect of water that we must understand. Water is a social good and also an economic good. Normally, when you bring in private partnerships, what they focus more is the economic aspect of the water resource. Government has a responsibility to meet the social good for the people of Ghana. So that is why strategically, when it comes to water supply, you want government inputs as much as possible. Like Ole said, we want private partnership, but it has to be a strategic partnership. And we have done this before. If you remember, we had Ghana Water Company and Aquavitens. It was a private partnership to bring in the knowledge from the private sector to improve on water supply. And that is the only way we can go. But to give out the social aspect to a private enterprise may compromise, the social aspect for, water, and that is very important.
So we have Eric from Odoko. Eric.
Hello, my dear sister and my brother.
Yes.
I'm suggesting that we have every year opening the Barry Dam from the north, Burkina. My sister, I'm suggesting that I think President Akufo-Addo have that plan suggestion in the environment. And if we can store those water, you see, maybe one in Tamale, in maybe Kumasi, and come to maybe the Accra, somewhere, Uniba or Kokodia, and stock some. We can build a very good dam, stages by stages. You see, instead of us to allow this water to flow down into the sea, we can consume those water very widely. You hear me? And therefore we can help the farmers to even have irrigation and have water on their farm. But every year we open this dam and it gets flooded, it disturbs a lot of people. Why don't you do dams, break it in 3 different phases? You store here, some here, you store some here, some millions in northern region. You come to the Bonga Hafo region, you store some. You come to the maybe Accra, eastern region, you store some. At least we will have enough water to give to the farmers, the urban areas, the anything. Why are we not doing this? Because of politics, then let's talk together, the two parties should sit down and say, oh, this is national project. If this one goes, this one should continue. It's long overdue that they are not doing. Every time, there's no country who have that opportunity of that kind of quantum of water flowing down in their country, and they don't make good use of it. They allow it to flow into the sea, which is very bad. I think it's about time they have to see the way they will utilize that dam and divide it into 3 phases, and store it largely. We see a lot of scavaters from the Galamsey people. These things can work very seriously and save water for our country.
Well, thank you very much, Eric.
Those who are responsible, let's see to it that we have phases of dams so that we don't waste that water that every year we are spending money, not more, blah, 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 flooding people and this. Let's store them very well.
Eric, Eric, your point is well noted. Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. Now, Mr. Studrup, we've listened to him, and I mean that's the point he just made was what I said earlier. I mean, if we have Pualugu, if Pualugu is stopping what's from the north, what about the south and the middle belts?
But I mean, it's right. It's a good example of how we should improve, use the potential of the water streams to make livelihoods and growth in the whole country, and that requires management of water at local level, regional level, but also between countries. Actually, last week we launched a Team Europe initiative managing water between Burkina Faso and Ghana and many other countries around Africa. And I think that kind of institution that can manage the flows and the quality is so important, and that's where you need to start to talk with.
What of people in the communities themselves? What do they do to? Yes, government cannot do everything to make you resilient, but as a member of a community, what do you also do to be resilient to the effect of climate change?
You can do water harvesting. You can go with small water associations that really manage the water. Groundwater wells have to be maintained. All these institutions are set up. The soft parts around the technical installations, water utilities is so important, and it's often why things are not working. So that has to be, and it costs money to run a proper water service. So that you also need to accept you have to pay for that service.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Alpha. Rounding up, what are your suggestions on how we can make communities more resilient to climate change and its effects on groundwater sources?
Yeah, first of all, just as Oli pointed out, the capacity or the resilience has to come from the individual. We understand that government must provide support because climate change science is new to most people. The experience of it is not, because people actually experience changes in their lives, and the innovation has to start from the individual and the community, and that is where government can support any initiative that is started by a community. Of course, government has a policy on how to build capacity, but the capacity should not be uniform because people face different challenges based on what the impacts of climate change are.
So in communities where they do not have the resources, their communities are really poor, how do they build their resilience? How do they come together?
The initiative is what is important. When it comes to the resources to enhance that resilience, that is where government and civil society and other parties come in. But we want local-based initiatives. What do you want to do to be able to resist or minimize the impacts of the climate change? What is good in one community will not be the same in another. So we are looking at this, initiatives from the communities.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen, for your time on the program. As always, it's been Wash, and my guests have been Olga Studrup, his counselor, Water, City and Resilience, the Netherlands Embassy, the Danish Embassy, the Danish Embassy. Well, and we also have Dr. Bob Alpha, head of Planning Water Resources Commission. They have been my guests in the studio in the program today. We'll see you again next week with another edition of Wash. Do stay tuned to the rest of our programs. Bye for now.